Hello, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown. And today I'm going to take a different kind of approach to a look at a case which I actually was shortly involved with back in 2000. When I was newer to profiling, I already had worked some cases, but I was contacted about this case, and it is the murder of Mary Elaine Shereika. And I'm approaching this differently because I want to show you a bit about how things can go, in my opinion, a little wrong because of profiling. Yes, profiling can cause a case to go wrong if it's not profiled correctly and in the appropriate way. Also, if one doesn't understand certain things about kinds of crimes and look at them in the right way, you lose a lot of time and you lose a lot of evidence and information. And this case just is exactly that. So one of the things I've requested, this is a live show, so welcome everybody who is in the chat room. This is a live show, and I've asked everybody in the chat room not to do any homework. So sometimes when I do my shows, I want people to look at specific documentaries because I'm going to comment on the documentaries, and I don't want to do the whole long story because I'm not a storyteller. What I'm teaching is profiling and case analysis. So I don't want to waste a whole bunch of time getting into teeny little details. And sometimes there's very interesting things in the documentaries which I'm not going to steal from the documentaries. So I want people to see those things. In this case, I did not want anybody to see the documentaries first because I wanted to not have people come in with, oh, I know the end of the story. I will link the documentaries in the information below. So if you are not at the live show, if you're one of my viewers coming later, don't watch the documentaries first. Go watch this show, and later on, if you want to see the documentaries, I will tell you, go ahead and watch them, but don't do it before the show because I really want to make some points, and the documentary it gets in the way, and I don't want it to do that. Okay, so anyway, welcome everybody. Again, I think I've said hello to everybody in the chat room. A few new people have rolled in, and welcome here. And if you would like to be in the chat room, my shows are all my shows twice a week. I have 2 shows a week, Letter Live, the case show like this, and a hangout during the week. And if you'd like to join in, please do join. Go down to the link, click on it, and join Patreon. It's $5 a month. I only have one level, and you get to be part of the community and come to the live shows. And that is, I love having everybody at the live shows that is part of the community because it makes a very nice, camaraderie, shall we say. And if you don't want to do that, it's okay. Please do subscribe to the channel. All of my videos are public once the live show is over. So I don't hide anything and just have, only my patrons can see it. No, I want people to learn things, so I don't do that. So anyway, yeah, subscribe to the channel. That does help keep an educational channel going. All right, let's get to it. So I'm going to try to figure out a little bit how I'm going to approach this. I'm going to start with, I'm just going to tell you what happened to, I'm going to call her Elaine Shereika. Her name is Mary Elaine Shereika, but people called her Elaine. So I'm going to go with that. I'm going to read a little blurb. I want to point out this interesting thing. This is one of these cases that nobody knows about, unless you watch a couple of documentaries as they rolled by. There's certain documentary shows, Discovery Channel, 48 Hours. They do a whole bunch of very interesting cases, but are very not known. Why do they do that? Because after a while, you run out of cases that are well known, and you have to go to the lesser known. And there's nothing wrong with that. But people like on YouTube, for example, they don't make as much money on the lesser known cases. So you want to keep talking about the big cases. And so this is one of these cases where you can find very little about, except these 2 documentaries that rolled through. And so people go, who's Mary Elaine Shereika? Who? Because it wasn't highly publicized, shall we say. All right. So let me read you the blurb about what happened to her. And then I'm going to get into how I got involved and what happened at the time. Let's see. Okay, on May 23rd, 1988. This is quite an old case. 37-year-old Mary Elaine Shereika was out on an early morning jog before going to work, but failed to appear at her workplace. Her fiancé reported her missing, and later in the day, a Gambrills farmer plowing his rye field found her partially clothed body. She had been raped, stabbed, and finally strangled with a bloodied sock found next to her body. Also, there was a bread knife, a bloody bread knife found too. So that the guy dropped that sock, which he used on his hand to hold the knife, and then he dropped the knife. And there was also, by the way, tire prints in the field and on her. So the guy left a lot of evidence. So that's basically what I want to tell you about it so far. Okay, so, well, yeah, you think very vicious, very, very vicious, horrible crime. And one of the documentaries, which I think it was, I'm trying to remember which one it was. I think it's, now I'm blanking. I think it's the ID one. I think it's Discovery. But her daughter talks about when they found out what happened to mom. And she was a teenager, and she had a younger brother. The police came, and she said at first the fiancé went out to search for her, and he didn't find her. And lucky for the fiancé, because he's going to be the first one looked at, right? Or the ex-husband. Both of them had alibis. Thank God for that. Those poor guys, they had alibis. But then she said when the police showed up at the door, and they're in the suits and everything, they knew it was not good news. And they sat down and told the fiancé and the daughter and son that they found the mother murdered. And this just, I don't cry very often. It gets to me. Anyway, the younger brother, she said, ran upstairs away. He ran away up to his bedroom. She could hear him howling up there. That's the kind of thing that always gets me when you think about what they went through, especially at that moment in time. And that's why if you're a police detective, you really freaking don't want to have to go to that person's house and tell them that news. It's horrible. Super sad. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. What state did this happen in? Okay, cauliflower. Sorry. I'm reading for them in the middle of here. This actually happened in Anne Arundel County in Maryland, which is I'm in Prince George's County, and this is the next county over. It's just about, I could be there in 20 minutes. And by the way, when you listen to some podcasts, they go Anne Arundel County, and it's just kind of like, I'm like, no, it's Arundel. That's Arundel. Yeah. But hey, I messed up pronunciation too. So it's the next county over from me. So it's a Maryland case. In Prince George's. It's in Anne Arundel County. And this is going to be part of my issue. When cases happen in different counties, a lot of times the detectives in those counties don't talk to each other. They're focused on their case, and this one's focused on his case, and they don't talk. So that can be a problem when you're trying to determine exactly what the heck happened. Okay, so now, so I want to now tell you what happened in this case. Okay, so I was brought into this case way later. So this is not, let me get the date again. So this was 1988. Case went cold. Case went totally cold. And, but I did get I was contacted by her daughter, who is in the documentaries, by the way. And so, hold on a second. I'm trying to get these in order. So the daughter contacted me because, so here's when I said this. Well, let me just read you what the daughter said first. Daughter contacted me, Jennifer Scott. She said, "Thank you for responding so quickly." This is back in 2000. But she was killed in 1998. So we're talking 12 years later. Let's see. Mom's name is Mary Elaine Buchanan Shereika, but she went by Elaine. She was murdered in Gambrills, Maryland which is in Anne Arundel County, about a mile from our home. Our home. Mom had run nearly every morning for 13 years. And this was one of her normal routes. And of course, this is always an issue. People always say, change your routes, especially you got a stalker or something, change your routes all the time. But, generally speaking, people like to go jogging where that's their route. I mean, and people have to live normal lives. And you don't expect that you're going to be a victim of a horrific crime because you went on your normal jogging route. However, there's two things about normal jogging routes. If someone is out to get you and they know where you're going to be, they will find you and get you there. Also, if you run a normal route in an isolated place, somebody you don't have any clue about can also get you there. And this is going to be very important in this case. So she went, she was attacked that morning, raped and murdered. She was bumped with a vehicle, her clothes removed, her throat was slit, and she was hit on the head and stabbed. They tell me she was unconscious immediately, but I think that was just said to humor me, which often is true. Because you just don't want to think of your loved one going through so much pain and agony and fear. You just rather than be out of it. I was told I could not say the autopsy report. By the way, I've outlasted at least 8 homicide detectives. What families go through, people have no clue what families go through. And that's why once upon a time, way back, my original idea for starting an organization was called Citizens for Case Closure. That was my original idea. I wanted citizens to get together to work to encourage cold cases to be closed, because I saw people like her daughter going through all this hell trying to get information about the case. Is it being worked on? Is anybody doing it? And that I failed dismally at that. I tried to get people involved, and I'm really, quite frankly, not really good at, shall we say, running an organization or bringing people in. I'm not good at advertising, so I sucked. So my idea was great, but it didn't work out. So then I changed the name to Sexual Homicide Exchange, and the idea at that point was that I was very heavily involved in. I wanted to close cases which I believe serial killers are involved in, where women, especially women, but also can be men, whatever, children. There were a number of cases in an area which I didn't think were being looked at and connected. So I started Sexual Homicide Exchange, and that's when Jennifer Scott, Elaine's daughter, contacted me at that point in my evolution of trying to do stuff. So she said she outlasted 8 homicide detectives. That goes to show you also that a problem a lot of times is, over the years, new detectives, they show up, and are they going over the old cases over and over and over again and reviewing everything? Probably not, unless it's a cold case squad. So a lot of times when people say, ask the police, are you doing anything? And they always say these famous words, "We're working on it," and really it's just sitting on a shelf someplace. So she said this next. Evidence consists of very little bodily fluids. The strongest suspect, however, there was DNA in this case. This was before DNA existed. You know what I'm saying? I mean, DNA testing was worth anything. So prior to like 1990, people say they might have retained stuff, but they didn't necessarily put it through the processing of DNA. Or as time went on, they used to need a lot of processing, like RFLP, which is like, I'm just going to make up a thing here, a big amount. And then later on, it was PCR, and then it was STR. So over time, you needed less and less. And now you can pretty much, almost need nothing to be able to do a lot of DNA testing. But back in when she was murdered, it really wasn't a thing yet. So, and then it was a thing, but they didn't have enough. So, it goes like that. So, but they did have DNA in her case, and this is going to play a huge part in how the case was solved. And so, but this is where it gets interesting. The strongest suspect in the case was a man named Michael Mikolajewicz. Okay, normally I don't like to give people's names out who turn out not to be guilty in a case. However, I will do that in this case. Why? Because this guy, it's this guy. Okay, so This is also Elaine at a younger age. This is Mikey. Now, Mike, you see the Anne Arundel County Police Department. There he is. Well, he's a criminal, so that's why I don't have a problem with it. And then when you see this is Jennifer talking about the case. This is Mike, and here we have over here Mike, the man pleads guilty to masterminding a ball bat slaying. So he murdered somebody. so he was kind of a good suspect. So she says the strongest suspect at the time when she contacted me, which is in 2000, is a man named Michael Lajunas. He is serving time in the Cumberland for federal murder. Happened on Fort Meade, which is close by, about 6 months after Mom was killed. He has told people that he killed a woman prior to the killing of the kid that he is serving time for. He beat his head in. It was a drug deal gone bad. He beat his head in with a baseball bat to kind of basically, pretty much, tossed his head across the room. Very, very vicious. Now, here's what gets really interesting. He knew our family and, in fact, had an argument with my mother a week before her death. The argument was over this. This guy, she worked with him, and there's varying statements about this, but whether they actually dated or he was an ex-boyfriend. But he was older than her. She was like 17, and he was like 23. And he was a drug user, whatever. He was a scumbag. And so Mom, Elaine, was like, she told this guy, you can't date my daughter because, sorry, you're too old, and, no, you're not dating my daughter. That happened like a week before she was murdered. And one of the things you always look at in a case is what happened just prior to somebody being murdered that might be a cause of the murder. It could be a divorce hearing. It could be somebody was found there cheating on somebody. So there's somebody there, like right before the murder, who has a reason to be pissed off at the murder victim. You look at them, and you should look at them. This guy had every reason to be looked at as a possible suspect. Now, it said let's see. He knew our family and, in fact, had an argument with mother a week before her death. He drove the type of car that would have left the tire tracks found in the field. I actually do not know if that is accurate or not. The police did a PNR, she means a PCR, DNA test, and had positive results. So at some point, they did a DNA test, and had positive results, which is very confusing here. But supposedly, they said there was an issue with that it was contaminated stuff. And so so they couldn't prove that actually his DNA was at the scene. All right. So now, was it him? So I want to go to, see what I want to go to. Let me just look over here a second. I did respond. I gotta look on my computer because the little pictures next to me are a little too small for me to read, for me to know which one I want to do. Okay. She 100% believed he killed her mother. She absolutely believed that. And for years, she believed that. And on top of why she believed that, let me show you what. There's a guy I talked to. Where is he? Where are we? Okay, there was many people on the case, which I did communicate with prior to in 2000. But in 2001, I talked with this guy, Dear Sergeant Waltermeyer, and you'll find him in the documentaries. Nice talking to you the other day. I'm sending a fax copy of our brochure, blah, 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 blah. All right. Waltermeyer. Waltermeyer came in later as part of like a cold case squad-y thing. And what is really interesting, when Waltermeyer came in, where's Waltermeyer? Waltermeyer, where are you? This is Sergeant Waltermeyer. He's in the documentaries. He comes across a little bit like, look, I solved this case. If it wasn't for me, type of thing. And I don't quite buy what he says. I think, when the media shows up and they're like, hey, tell us about this, and that, you're on the spot and you're going to tell the best story you can. I'm not saying I'm not saying he didn't work on the case and hard on the case, but some of the stuff just makes me laugh. So When he came onto the case, the FBI had put out a profile on this case. I want to show you the profile. Profile is this. Now here's Waltmar. The FBI profiler basically told us we were looking for a young white male, 18 to 25 years old, probably familiar with the area, lived in the area, likely lived with his parents or somebody that took care of him. It's unlikely they held a job, or if they did, it was a menial labor job. Okay, so guess who fit the profile like a glove? This dude. He was a scumbag, drug dealing, knew the area, knew the family, white guy between the ages of 18 and, what was it, 18 and, what was the age? 18 and 25. Okay. So he fit it like a glove. The question here comes down to, this is an FBI profile. And I have said over and over again, I am not a fan of FBI profiling. Why? Because they make stuff up that isn't based on evidence. It's a lot of it's what's called inductive profiling, where you look at a whole bunch of cases and you come up with an age range that would be, and there was this idea that, who would kill people, what the race would be and what their educational level would be. It's all very like research oriented, but not based on the crime scene. So I'm looking at this, and the first thing I'm thinking is, how do they know it's a white guy? Couldn't it be an Asian guy? Couldn't it be a Hispanic guy? Couldn't it be a black guy? How do they know? Now, semen was left at the scene. She was raped. So we can take female off the plate. Evidence-wise, not a female. Now, of course, there are some people that get really, Agatha Christie-like, and they'll go, maybe a female jumped out who hated her and killed her. And then they took a used condom and stuffed it inside her and left semen. Is that possible? Now I'm going to go to the chat room now, just to check on your thoughts here. This is a good point. Cauliflower, this is an excellent point. Do you think the profile may have been developed to fit the suspect they have? In theory, no. That FBI would make a profile based on what the evidence is and not have any clue about any suspect. However, have I seen cases where certain FBI profilers already knew the suspect and then built their profile around the person that they think they pretty much know already did it? Yes. A lot of shenanigans going on, especially when it comes down to writing books and bragging later that you are brilliant and all that kind of stuff. So I have seen it done. So could that be done? I don't think in this case it was done that way. I think I'm going to tell you the reasons that they came up with the concept of who killed her mother and why this guy fit it. Okay. So here is the way of thinking that the FBI has used for many years, which bugs the heck out of me. All right. So I'm just going to go back to a picture of mom. Okay. So going back to mom. Okay. All right. So in the area, if you look at the demographics of the area, it was more white than black. So statistically, you could say, probably a white guy. And so now, do you base a profile on statistics? And my answer is never, never, never. You should not do that. I don't even care if it makes for all reasons, it could be the white guy. And it could, it's very likely a white guy. Still, it's not based on evidence. You can say, if you want to point out in your profile, statistically, and I don't remember what Gamble's was at the time. Let's say you say statistically Gamble's is 95% white, Caucasian. So chances are the guy's white. That you want to say that, okay, but don't give race unless you have some reason to say why the person is of a certain race. I've had cases where I have no clue. In her case, I would have not given any racial component because I don't know. From the crime scene, I haven't got a clue. I've seen other crime scenes where I have said, based on the evidence of the crime scene, I can actually say, I believe the person is likely white, black, Hispanic, Asian, whatever the heck it is, based on behaviors at the crime scene. And we're going to show you a behavior at a crime scene in this, not this case, but a related case, which to me would have been me going, maybe doing a racial thing. Okay. So anyway, start out with this guy, like, okay, that was based on nothing. Now, what did they base 18 to 25 on? All right. Generally speaking, they usually roll out usually 20 to 30, no, 25 to 35 for serial killers. That's their serial killer thing, mostly because that's the biggest age range for criminality in general. So if you throw the age range between like 25 and 35, you're going to pretty much cover everybody. More so than you're going to say, oh, the guy's 60. You're like, what's the statistics on that? Okay, it's really low. It doesn't mean it couldn't be 60 years old, but it's lower. So if I'm going to try to just play the odds, I'm going to go with like 25 to 35. In this case, I think the reason they picked 18 to 25 was because the guy left a frickload of evidence in the field. The blood, the sock, the weapon, the tire tracks. So basically, the FBI, I think, thought the guy's an idiot, and therefore, and an idiot, they're thinking is probably somebody fairly young who hasn't learned very much yet how not to screw up, how not to screw up and leave all the evidence at the crime scene. So they're thinking he's young, but there's no evidence there's no actual evidence he was 18 to 25, but Mike fit right in there. So they're like, okay. Then they said, if the guy's 18 to 25 and he's this loser who's out here killing people, probably he's not doing that well in life. Okay, that's a reasonable assumption. So then they say, oh, he lives with his parents. You often hear this. He lives with his mother, and has either isn't working or has a menial job because he's a loser. So, but you could probably fit half the town into that, So there's nothing exactly at the crime scene that says that. And what we're going to see in this case is that all it takes is sometimes a couple of years on a similar crime scene for the person to not actually fit those things. So you have to be very, very careful of making statements. And this is where I think FBI fails in. They make statements that the police saying, oh my God, it's an FBI profile, then say this must be true. And it isn't necessarily true. The other problem is, whenever I've ever done a profile for a police department, I have explained every single thing I've said. If I'm going to tell you the guy's this race or that race, I'm going to explain why. I'm going to explain that there's some behavioral pattern or some physical evidence, something that tells me that this guy is likely that race. I can't say absolutely, but likely that race. I'm going to explain it. Then if I'm going to say 18 to 25, I'm going to explain it. I'm going to say why he lives with his parents. I'm going to explain it. I may be wrong, but at least I'm going to explain it so the detectives can review that and see if it makes any damn sense to them. But the FBI puts out profiles as this is what it is. And because so much of it is vague, they can say, well, we're 90% correct, except for the 10% we weren't correct on really screwed the case up. So anyway, that was their little FBI profile. So Mikey fit the profile, except for the fact that when they finally came up with the DNA, it didn't match him. Didn't match. So, creepy dude knew the family, was pissed off at her. But does a creepy dude who knows the family necessarily behave in a way in which he's not just killing her, but he's raping her in a field? Generally speaking, when you see a person who is attacked, raped, murdered in a field while they're jogging, you're usually talking about a serial killer, not somebody who's just a friend of the family who's pissed off. A serial killer. And this is where I think the whole damn thing went wrong. What should have happened is that, and I talked to Walter Meyer, and I tried to get in as a profiler for this case because I said, originally, I said, I think this is a stranger homicide. And a stranger homicide meaning it's not somebody who's like Mike trying to get back at someone. It's not a revenge killing. I think it's a stranger homicide. If it's a stranger homicide, this is 100% likely to be a serial killer. And what I want what I've always wanted the law enforcement to do on any case, which doesn't appear to be a crime related to a family member, or divorce situation, or whatever, ex-boyfriend, whatever. If it looks like it's just a violent sexual homicide, it should be labeled suspected serial homicide, a crime, a suspected serial killer, possible serial killer. Put serial killer and serial homicide in the picture, because what didn't happen with this case at the time is they never looked at any other cases in the area to see whether just maybe there's a guy out there who is a serial killer. Now, later on, I find it quite amusing because Waltermeyer, later on, at least in the show, he says this: Waltermeyer believes the DNA evidence will provide the answer. And then he says, oh, wait a minute, that's not it. Sorry. We're talking about DNA there. Where's the other part? Where? Disappeared? Wait a minute. Okay, that's not it. Oh, man, where'd it go? How did I lose it? Dang it. See, I've lost my stuff again. He said nobody has thought about the fact that this might be a serial killer. And I'm like, yes, I said that back in 2001 to you. But now he says, I'm the one that came up with the concept that it could be a serial killer. And why did he come up with this concept? All right, so let's look at the other issues in this case. I can't believe I forgot to put that picture up. I thought it was up there. Yeah, it's so annoying. Where'd it go? I put the wrong one up. That's why. He says here, I'm looking at the MO of each of these cases. So there's more cases to come. And he says, it became more clear to me they could be related. No one had thought of that before. Okay, anyway, glad you thought of it now. But actually, whether he actually looked at this as being a possible serial killer case, I question. I think the thing happened was that there were two other cases that when DNA started being put into CODIS, into the DNA bank, they were shocked. They were shocked that 3 cases came up that were all matched. So I'm not so sure he figured out it was a serial killer until all the DNA came back as matching, and they're like, oh, by the way, these 3 cases are matching. Now, what 3 cases are these? All right, let's go to the other cases. And this is where it's really, really sad. One thing I want to say about her daughter bringing up Mike and why they investigate him, I don't have an issue with that at all. She gave information to the police that was valuable. He was a very good suspect. He didn't do it, but he was a great suspect. They did what they should have done. But now let's go back in time and see a case where the police, in my opinion, didn't do what they should have done, or the daughter of the victim didn't give them the information. So let's take a look at this one. All right. So the other case, next case here we want to talk about is this woman. And her, sorry, that's not what I wanted to do. Where's the other picture? I'm just all my pictures are missing. This is the one I wanted to do. These are the 3 women that eventually became connected. The DNA from this woman, and then we have Elaine, and then we have a young girl. And so let me go back to Wikipedia. All right, let's talk about this murder. This murder happened 2 years before Elaine was murdered. She was murdered. The first murder, they're talking about the first murder. The reason now is they've connected all 3 of them with DNA. The first murder occurred on October 8, 1986, when 34-year-old mother of 2, Boontem Anderson, was killed in her Gambrels home. Gambrels is like very close by where she lived. So this is in a same vicinity. It's still Anne Arundel County, same police department. 2 years apart, 2 women are brutally murdered in very much the same way. Nobody thought about they might be connected. All right. So on the day she was on sick leave from her job at Fort Meade, which is also in the area, and her new body was found by her fiance, who also a fiance's 11-year-old son. Okay, so poor fiance. The fiance had an alibi. But these guys lucked out, I tell you. They all had an alibi. She took the day off of work. Fiance was working. 11-year-old comes home. That's the fiance's fiance's son, her stepson. He comes back to the house, and he goes in the house, and he finds her dead in the bathtub. She had been sexually assaulted, stabbed, and strangled to death. Does that sound familiar? Stabbed and strangled to death, and sexually assaulted. So both of these, exactly the same MO. Sexually assaulted, stabbed, and strangled to death. Now, what happened with this case? They never came up with anybody until they finally got the DNA and put it into CODIS, and eventually it hooked to all three cases. Now, so what was the MO in these cases? Well, you see, sexually assaulted, stabbed, and strangled. Stabbed and strangled is interesting in that that's two things instead of just one thing. You know, the guy's really working overtime, not just strangling a person, not just stabbing a person, but doing both. That's an interesting MO. Doesn't prove that the same guy did it, but it's interesting. Both are sexually assaulted. So, and now one of the things that throws us out of whack a little bit, I'm going to ask if you see this, because this is where you got to be very careful with MO issues. What do you see as different between these two? They were both not the young, they were in their 30s, both of them, which is actually kind of older than serial killers tend to like. But what do you see as different? It's not like we didn't know about serial killers. We knew about serial killers. We didn't know how to investigate them. Oh, very good. Very, very good. Okay, this is correct. Difference is she was in her home and she was out in the open. That is a big difference. Yes, breaking into a home. One is home, one is outside. Race. That's another interesting thing. White woman, Asian woman. She's from Thailand. Okay. Yep. So two good things that are different. So here's the problem with serial. A lot of people say against serial killers. One is the stupid concept that they attack, they choose women that remind them of their sister, their mother, their girlfriend. And therefore, like Ted Bundy, everybody's, so he picks only women with, hair split, down straight hair with a part in the middle. That, that's why he picked them. No, he just picked college girls who all look that way at that age. And you'll notice even with Ted Bundy, there were some women who didn't fit that, especially the last girl he killed was a younger girl who looked nothing like that. So, but that's been pushed forever, that there's some psychological thing that makes you pick a woman that looks like somebody you hate. And here you got a Thai woman and a white American woman. Okay, is he into 30-year-olds? Is that the thing? He's into 30-year-olds. So the concept that a serial killer picks people because they remind him of something, he's got an exact type, is nonsense. Do serial killers tend to have a type? Some do. Some like really pretty girls. Most serial killers pick small people because they're easier to kill and manage. They don't pick, as I point out all the time, if you weigh 300 pounds, you're pretty much safe. It's hard to get your pants off. It's hard to stuff you into the trunk of the car. And hard to pull you into the bushes. You're lucky. You're not probably. And also serial killers tend to like little trophies. And I hate to say it, but 300 women in the United States aren't considered trophies to a serial killer. They want somebody that like a cheerleader type. So because that makes them feel powerful and like, ha, 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 I got you, gorgeous girl, that kind of thing. But a lot of times the reason they pick their victims is they're convenient. That's the number one reason. And if you don't understand they pick women or any victim because they're convenient, you run into the problem of trying to match them to some kind of emotional bullcrap. So these women were convenient, but they didn't look at them because as a connection, because the races were different and because one was inside and one was outside. And again, the problem is not a serial killer doesn't say, I'm only going to commit inside crimes. I'm only going to commit outside crimes. It just depends what's going on. And that's one of those failures in MO. Don't exclude somebody because the MO doesn't match. Same thing with a weapon. Now, in this particular case, all three of these were killed the same way in the same fashion. So that's kind of nice. But there's two problems there. One is a serial killer can change his MO with weapons because let's say he took a knife out the first time And when he was stabbing the woman, he cut himself, and he's like, "Oh, that sucks. I left, my blood at the scene." Next time he said, I'm not taking a knife. I'm just going to strangle her. Now it doesn't match. Or the other problem is there's only so many ways to kill a victim: strangle him, stab him, shoot him, hit him on the head with a rock. Maybe there's only so many ways, except there are some more unusual ways. But generally speaking, these are the easy ways that people use. So you get a bunch of stabbing victims. Women who are raped and stabbed doesn't mean it's the same serial killer either, because that's just an easy thing to do. So MO is something that you can look at, but you have to be careful. But I think they just ignored this because the MO was, the stabbing and strangling thing was consistent. But one was inside, one was outside, one was Thai, one was white. So yeah. All right, now let's take a look at the last one that also was linked in this serial killer triad thingy. Okay, so this poor little girl, she was on January 15th, 1993. Now this is 1993. We're talking about 5 years after the murder of Elaine Shereika. 5 years later. And again, people say, well, wouldn't he have killed more often? Well, that's another huge issue. Maybe not. Sometimes things go well in their lives and they don't kill during those times. The guy that killed her, meanwhile, before he killed her, actually got married, had a kid, or maybe two, not sure. He was actually doing sort of okay. I'll let you know that his wife did divorce him after she found out he was a serial killer. But anyway, so this girl, she was 14 years old. So she's not 30 years old. She's 14. Her name was Lisa Kathleen, I'm not sure I got the name right, Hanel, a ninth grade student at the local Old Mill High School. She vanished while walking her usual path to school. So this guy, in these two cases, you've got people who had a consistent path. So the MO between this is correct, but what about there's no sign of breaking, entering, it's inside. Okay. So anyway, she didn't show up at school. The girl was reported missing by her mother, and a search was initiated. The mother's boyfriend also had a good alibi. There's boyfriends and fiancés lucked out in all three cases that they weren't like the suspect. He found her body in a ditch in a ravine behind the school's premises the following morning. She was almost completely nude, except for a sock, with stab wounds and strangulation marks on her body. Unlike the previous victim, she hadn't been sexually assaulted, so they didn't get semen from the scene. They got semen here, but not from here. But they did find a cigarette, and this is good. This is an interesting part of what I'm going to do with the racial thing here in a minute. Or where's the cigarette? Hold on a second. So this guy, it was an unsmoked cigarette. So dude, I don't know what he was using it for, to tell you the truth. Now I've lost my cigarette. What the heck? I'm not doing well today. Hey, I've lost everything. What the heck? Where's my cigarette? I had a cigarette. Oh, okay. No, where is it? Oh, here it is. This maybe? No, not that. Where's my cigarette? I had a really cool picture of the cigarette. Oh, here it is. Sorry. So anyway, you're going to see it. This is obviously the suspect the guy that eventually killed them all. So that the cat is out of the bag now. But so there's interesting information from there, which they didn't get. And there's interesting information here. You see the blood? That was the blood of the 14-year-old girl. And on the other end was his saliva. So there was DNA here, and also DNA in the other scene as well. Okay, so we got these three women, two women and a 14-year-old girl. And they didn't solve any of the cases. Now, eventually, because I had DNA from all the cases, all the DNA went in, and yes, they finally solved the case of who I just tell you, take that back. They didn't actually solve the case. This is where it gets also interesting. Let me go back to what Walter Meyer said. He believes DNA evidence will provide the answer. And the results came back in 2003, which is 2 years after I talked to Walter Meyer. And all the results came back. All three victims had the same killer. So that's why, Walter Meyer is saying, I knew it was a serial killer. Now you do, because the evidence is obvious that all three were killed. So the DNA evidence is clear as hell. But they didn't know who did it. But here's what happened. They put all the DNA into CODIS, and they came up with this guy, Alexander Watson Jr. So this is the guy who killed all three of them. And he got caught. The reason he got caught was because he is an idiot. And if DNA, his DNA finally caught him because nothing else did. This is a picture of his last victim, which there's for some reason there's no picture of this woman anyplace. I went on grave sites, and this is from a grave site or a memorial site type thing. Her name was Deborah Cobb. In 1994, which would be 1 year after he killed the 14-year-old girl, he killed Deborah Cobb at this location in Prince George's County, which is the next county over. He killed 37-year-old office manager Deborah Cobb during a robbery of a workplace in Forestville, Maryland. He was arrested as a suspect not long after, as he worked in the same office plaza. It's not really a plaza. It's kind of just an area with a bunch of, stuff. It's not really a plaza. He worked for I forgot what he worked for. He worked for a trucking company doing I don't know what he was doing. He was arrested because I guess the evidence was real obvious, and it wasn't anything to do with the DNA. It's just that it was very obvious. So he pleaded guilty to the first-degree murder charge at his trial, blaming his addiction to crack cocaine for the brutal crime. He got a life imprisonment sentence. He was sent to Jessup Correctional Institution without being connected to the other killings until a decade later. So that's so in other words, he went to prison, but I guess the DNA thing wasn't a big thing. We're talking 1994, and there wasn't enough there. And finally, his DNA went into CODIS, and then a decade later, the three women's where the DNA already matched, then connected back to him. And they're like, oh, this is the guy. So they finally caught him, a serial killer who was Black. Hello, FBI. You were wrong on that one, weren't you? And he didn't kill the women that he killed because they looked like his mother or sister or whatever. He killed them because they were available. And I don't think he cared a bit. He was probably not a racist guy at all. He could care less what race they were. They were available. What happened in this case was that they didn't ever do the right thing, which is consider each one of these cases a suspected serial killer, a possible serial killer, suspected serial homicide, because each one of these cases, it was a sexual assault that ended up in a murder. So that's a sexual homicide. Sexual homicides are rarely committed by boyfriends, husbands, stuff. They may be staged as that, but they're rarely committed by them. Rarely are somebody is it's not a revenge killing gone bad as looking, just not. So when you have this kind of thing, you're looking and say, wow, it's got to be a serial killer, man. Now, you can check everybody out, but you still got to check out, maybe it's a serial killer. If it's a serial killer, the problem they made, the mistakes they made was they went with a bad profile, which was, if you say immediately say it's a white guy, or say it's a Black guy when it's not a Black guy either. If you immediately give race not based on anything, you can throw an entire investigation off because they're just simply not looking that direction. Also, if you're not looking at a serial killer possibility, you're going to go in the wrong direction. And if you're, as far as ages go, you got to be careful about that too, because what's very interesting is this crime is fascinating to me because he was 17 when he killed her. 17. So he was actually 1 year below the age they claimed he was. Was it 2 years later? Let me see. Wait a minute. Okay. She was killed in 1986. Elaine was killed in 1988. So when they said 18, well, they said, okay, by that time he was 17 when he killed her. So he would have been 19. So they actually had the age range right. But it's pretty unusual. You don't think of a 17-year-old committing the kind of crime in this particular house. Now, one of the reasons they thought he was a loser, kind of didn't have a good job, it didn't work, whatever, lived with his parents, was because he was in a field, he left all the evidence there. They probably thought this was a much more sophisticated crime, which is 2 years prior when he was 17. because no sign of breaking and entering. Which, first of all, you want to make sure that's meaningless. And a lot of times, if you see breaking and entering, well, then it's more obvious that somebody, she didn't maybe know broke into the house. Maybe she didn't know. But also, people just knock on the door, somebody will open it. So she could have simply opened the door to somebody, and so there's no sign of breaking and entering, or she could have known the person. When they got in the house, they tied her hands behind her back, brutally killed her, put her in the bathtub. Well, not with water, but I just put her body in the bathtub. And also, there was his fingerprints, I guess, seemed like some fingerprints were on a hairdryer. I don't know if there was water in the bathtub. It was a very, very vague stuff. So, and that was thrown in the bathtub with her. So I kind of wondered, wouldn't you put water in there if you're going to do that? But it looked like a more sophisticated killing than this killing. And yet, this was when he was 17. This is when he's 19. So go figure. You got to be careful of that stuff. Now, here's the real important part. So she was killed. She opened the door to somebody, either because somebody knocked and she was just open the door. And that's kind of like me. I probably opened the door. Or she knew the person. Now, if they suspected it's possible she knew the person, shouldn't they check out all the people she knew? So here is what gets really weird, that I don't understand what went wrong here. The daughter says that after her mom was killed, a fellow she knew, this guy, the serial killer, her son, her brother worked with him at a fast food joint. He had been to her house a couple of times. He was a known person. He was 17, admittedly, but hey, he knew the family. So now it's interesting that it could be a complete stranger. It's true. Because in the case of Elaine, it wasn't the guy who knew Elaine. It was a complete stranger. In this case, it actually was not a complete stranger. It was a guy who knew them. The younger the person is, the more likely it is they will attack somebody they know, because it's simply, they're just like, oh, I know she lives there, I'll go get her. So actually, the younger the person is, the more likely they're a neighbor or somebody who has some connection to the family. This guy. Now, you say, well, they might have looked at him. Okay. But here's what I don't understand. She says that just like a couple weeks after she died, was murdered, he picks her up from a football game and says, I'll give you a ride home. But he doesn't take her home. He pulls off on a different road and he says to her, if I were to kidnap and rape and murder you, what would you, or at least rape you? If I would kidnap and rape you, what would you do? And she was obviously totally creeped out. She said, well, I would like fight really hard and like leave marks all over your body so they know it was you. And then he took her home. What kind of guy says to somebody, what would you do if I raped you? Right after her mother's been raped and murdered. What kind of guy does that? I'd say a guy that should be interrogated heavily. So, in other words, Elaine was murdered 2 years later, when this guy was actually somebody the police should have been investigating and possibly proving. If he's only 17, maybe there was evidence at his home that he committed this crime. He did live in the area. He lived with his parents, worked with her son. Maybe there would have been blood on some of his clothes. Maybe there would have been a weapon, but something. What the heck? There's no information about why the police did not properly investigate him when he actually said to the daughter a couple weeks later, what would you do if I did this to you? He should have been a top suspect. Why wasn't he? Too young? I don't know. But that's the first thing. I would have looked at him heavily because he is creepy as hell. Now, again, when you look at this guy, I look at him heavily too. So whether there's two possibilities. One is that it's a serial killer that is a stranger, but it doesn't mean that somebody you know can't be a serial killer. So this guy could be a serial killer too. Why not? I mean, just because you happen to know him doesn't mean he's not a serial killer, because serial killers are known by somebody. And sometimes serial killers know their victims. So we have the first one we have, where'd he go? Sorry, I lost him. So we have the first murder. The first murder. Sorry, I just completely lost it. Where'd it go? Jeez. Didn't I just have a picture of that? This is weird. Oh, there it is. It's hard to see these sometimes. So we had the first murder where the suspect was actually connected. The person who should have been a suspect was actually connected to the family and said creepy things about rape and murder. Perhaps he should have been a big suspect. Then if he was on the suspect list for her, even if they couldn't prove it, 2 years later, when she was murdered running in the nearby area, maybe they should have looked at him as a suspected serial killer, but they didn't. Then we get the third one, and here's where it gets really weird. Okay, so we got this guy. This is Alexander Wayne Watson. We have this case, which he knew the woman. The second case, we don't know, he was just in the area. I'll explain that a little bit. Third case, he was also in the area of this girl who got killed, the 14-year-old going to school. She walked by his apartment building. There was a cigarette there, and it had blood on one end and has saliva on the other end. But here's just a kicker. And I know that some people are going to object to this, but I'm going to say it anyway. The cigarette was a Newport cigarette. Now, what can you tell me about a Newport cigarette? Anybody? Amy says, I knew a serial killer. Well, glad you're still alive to tell us that story. Did she tell the police? I don't know, Amy. That's a good question. See, when you watch these documentaries, you never know what the heck went on. Did she not tell the police about this because she was scared? Did the police not and interview her properly? Did they not ask every who knows? The guy the thing is, he worked with the brother, so they had to have known he existed. Why did they not interview him properly? Did they not interview the daughter properly? I don't know. I can't answer the question. So I don't know if she reported to police and didn't investigate. I have no clue. Whether it was a crappy detective or a good detective, don't know. Yeah, he's pretty sadistic. He killed her mother, and then he's mocking her, essentially. What a creep. Yeah. Go back to the cigarette, though. What do you got on the cigarette? This is actually true. Newports are common among Black smokers. 100%. So, 100%. Newport is a menthol and very popular in the African-American community. It just is. Way less white people smoke it than Black people. And I have one son who's a smoker, and he smokes Newports, and guess what race he is? He's Black. So it just is what it is. And one of the things I used to do, when I did investigations, I had an investigation one day. I went to a really, really rough part of town, and I was going to a strip club. There was a Black strip club, and I was trying to get there and get into the club, and also because it was nighttime, and it was like I was obviously not belonging there, and but I wanted to get along with people. And I used this over and over again when I went into an African American section of town. I took Newports with me, and so when people, I'm like standing outside, they're like, hey, can I get a cigarette? Sure. And I hand them a Newport. I made friends. I made friends with Newports. So, by the way, that was an interesting strip club. There was a girl from the strip club who had been murdered, and I was taken into that strip club by very two big bouncers, and they pulled me into the back room, and there was a tiny little elderly Jewish woman back there. And she owned the club. I was like, kind of surprising. So anyway, there's a lot of interesting things that go on in shady businesses, let me put it that way. But Newports I carried with me as essentially to make friends in certain places that I need to make friends in when I was investigating. So now we have this guy knew her, and now we got a third killing, which has a menthol cigarette. And I'm not saying that proves a white guy could smoke a Newport. I'm not saying you can't, but when you're putting things together and you're trying to identify, link crimes together, you're looking for some common denominators. So you got some similar MOs, but you got something a little different. But this guy knew her, was Black, and lived in the area of all three crimes. But they didn't pay attention. And then when he finally killed the woman in PG County, who was, by the way, Black. I haven't gotten to mention that yet. She's Black. So he killed a Thai woman, an Asian woman who was Thai. He killed two, an older white woman and a younger white girl, and he killed a Black woman. So the guy doesn't care about race. So he doesn't care. You know, that's one of the funny things when people like think all this nonsense about you only kill within your own racial thing. No, white guys kill Black women, Black guys kill white women. Nobody cares. Most of the time, they just don't care. It's where they live. And this is an important point. I've said over and over again, the majority of time, serial killers kill close to where they live or work. Why is that? It's because they know the area. They know the area very well. And that's the area they're in all day long, all night long. They know where the police are. They know who goes where. They know what's safe or not safe. You know, all these kind of things. So if you're going to attack somebody, you might as well stick, like I wouldn't go, like I know my area right here. It wouldn't behoove me to drive 20 minutes away, 30 minutes away to another area because I don't know what the heck's going on over there. I'd be kind of like, oh, maybe I don't know what street to go down. I don't know where the police are here. I don't know anything about this place. So where are people, especially dumping bodies, by the way, dumping bodies is even then when people actually kidnap somebody and abduct them and dump them, I always look for them to be actually more connected to the dumping place than to the abduction place. Why is that? Now, that's a different matter. In this case, he attacked a woman in her home, he attacked a woman in a field, and he attacked a girl in a school. He had to know all three of those places to be lying in wait, to grab these people, to grab these three females. The other place he worked with, he worked it right he didn't work in her office, but he worked right there. So all three of them, he lived near or worked near. So that is absolutely true. Now, if you're going to abduct somebody and then dump them someplace, you're more likely to abduct them. That'll be less likely to be someplace that's near your house and home or work. Why? Because when you're just abducting somebody, you're just looking around to see if anybody's in the area. If you can grab a girl while she's walking down the street, somebody walking home from whatever, you can just grab them and get them in your car quickly because nobody sees you. You don't really need to know much about the area. But if you're going to go dump the body and you got to spend that extra time, opening up the car and digging graves or whatever you're doing, you better be sure you're not pulling into a lane where it turns out to be Lover's Lane and there's like 6 witnesses there, a bunch of druggies back there who will then identify you. So you're going to know where you dumped the body. So abduction is a little bit looser, but if you're going to attack somebody in the location that they're at, usually, or dump them in a certain place, usually you're more connected to those areas. Now, there are times when people will have the balls, essentially, to abduct somebody, kill them, and then drive them an hour away into the mountains and get rid of them there. And the problem you have there is you just don't want to be stopped by the cops on the way. And some serial killers have been stopped by the cops with the body in the car. So it's a risky thing, but some do it. So when you're looking at these crimes, they should have looked at who had access to these people, either by knowing them or by living in the vicinity. And then if I were doing a profile and I said there's a higher chance this guy is African-American than white, it wouldn't be because of some statistics. It would be because of that cigarette. And I would explain that to the detectives just so they don't overlook a Black serial killer in favor of white serial killer just because this whatever woman, not this woman, she's Thai, but because Elaine was white, for example, so or the schoolgirl's white, so therefore it has to be a white serial killer, because he knew her and killed her first. If they had focused in on him and thought of this as a serial killer crime, and maybe, just maybe, look at who was around, maybe they would have gotten him, and maybe Elaine wouldn't be dead. Maybe the schoolgirl wouldn't be dead, and maybe the woman whose picture I'll never see was killed in her office, who had a husband and 2 children. Maybe she wouldn't be dead. So if you don't look at the case right, if you misprofile, if you don't examine what different possibilities there are when you're looking for a suspect, you can really screw things up, because you basically say, oh, that's not going to be the person, and you cut off a whole possibility. Again, if I said chances are he's more likely to be African American than white, doesn't mean that you shouldn't look at white guys, because everybody got white guy who just smokes Newports. You know what I mean? He smokes Newports, and you're like, well, that was a surprise, but doesn't mean it can't be true. But if you're looking at a whole group of people, and you're looking at who knew what, who was where, and you think, well, it's interesting that this guy knew her, worked with her son, said weird things to her daughter. Look at the guy. But they didn't look at the guy. And the only way he got caught was because of DNA. And so I don't know. I can't say whether they did, how good or bad job they did investigating. I really can't absolutely say, no. But I will say that I think they failed in, first of all, I don't, much as this fellow, oh, that's the ones I was looking for. Even though he said no one had ever thought about that before, I'm like, well, I don't know. You were on I don't know when he came in. There were so all these other investigators before him, other detectives. So maybe nobody in the first case thought. Maybe nobody in the second case thought. Maybe nobody in the third case thought. I don't know what those detectives didn't do. By the time he rolled in, he did talk to me. But he says, I'm the first one who thought about it. I don't know that I believe that dude, but okay. But I think they basically got caught 100% by DNA. Alexander Watson. Alexander Watson got caught by DNA because he screwed up this crime and was already in prison. And by the time DNA caught up, he was already there with his DNA and the CODIS bank. So I'm not saying the detectives didn't work hard, but I don't know that they handled the cases properly. And if nobody connected these three cases, now these three cases were not that far apart in distance. I mean, the first three cases that he did, not the woman in PG County, but the other three were all in Anne Arundel County, all within like 10 minutes of each other. And you didn't think about a serial killer when it was a sexual homicide? All three. The girl was not sexually assaulted, but I'm thinking that was probably in play, but it just didn't happen. So essentially, she was totally nude, so it's not like she was killed for other reasons. So you had three basically sexual homicides. All three women were stabbed, strangled, and girl stabbed and strangled, all within a small area, and you didn't think there was a serial killer out there. And then when you did figure it out, then when the FBI did put in their 2 cents, they had to say it was a white guy and screw it all up. Bizarre. Yeah, this is correct. Poor ladies who might have been saved if more questions had been asked. No guarantee, but it's a thought. Yeah, I don't know that the questions weren't asked, but I don't understand why he wasn't a suspect in the first case. And the other problem we have is we don't have a thing called a suspect bank, which I would like to see, or even a witness, person of interest bank, I would call it. Because what will happen a lot of times is, let's say they had a person of interest bank and he was interviewed. All you have to say is the person's interviewed. So he goes into the interview bank. He was interviewed in the first case. Then when another case comes along, like the fourth one he killed, all you do is put his name in and you go, wow, he just came up in the first case. This is what drives me crazy. So a decade went by before he was even connected to any other cases, only by DNA. So if he killed the fourth woman and they knew who he was and they convicted him, why didn't his name pop up in the first case? Why wasn't it connected? Why didn't that happen? It should happen. So there should be we should be able, especially since you can have computers now, you should be able to type in every witness you have in your case, and that should be able to be, if a person starts showing up at a bunch of other places, like, this was a guy who lived next door in this case, and then another woman gets murdered, and turns out he works in her office, and then another woman gets murdered, turns out he's a security guard at the building, maybe it's that guy. So if you put those names in, he should have been noted as the killer way earlier, but he wasn't. So just a very frustrating thing. And I've had issues with the way serial homicides are handled for ages, and I've had an issue with the way the FBI deals with them. And I think if they dealt with it better, we would have better conclusions earlier on, and less people would be murdered. Not many people smoke these days. Well, less people smoke than they used to, but there's still people who smoke. So, okay, I smoked Virginia Slims about 40 years ago. Who smokes Virginia Slims? Somebody profile that. Who smokes Virginia Slims? Now, if I were profiling that case and there's a Virginia Slims at the scene, what would I more likely say? And that would be true. White women. Yes, a man smoking a Virginia Slims back in the day? Probably not. And definitely women. So in spite of the fact, sometimes things seem like they're, oh, you shouldn't say that it's a woman or a male or a female. You shouldn't say this person's race or whatever. There are certain things which are definitely interesting when you're examining a case, which can lead to looking a certain direction. Let's say a car is stolen, and the person's car that's stolen, let's say the person's car that was stolen was an 80-year-old woman, but the music playing in the car is something unlikely for an 80-year-old woman to be listening to. Could that indicate the person who has stolen the car? The kind of music, whether it was rap, whether it was country, whether it was certain kinds of rock, whatever it was, could that indicate? Now, I have to point out, you have to be very careful about this. And when I say indicate, you have to, again, when you're analyzing crime and you're putting a profile out, you can't say absolutely. For example, if my car is stolen and they bring the car in and they find it was tuned into a Bollywood station with Indian music, they're going, oh my God, an Indian guy stole the car. But no, I love Indian music. I love Bollywood music, not stuff, a sitar just playing a bunch of stuff you get in a massage room. But, I love Bollywood music. I've got tons of it. So yes, I would tune into a Bollywood station. So you have to, the first thing you got to do is go back to the person, the victim, and you find out what kind of person they are. So if I were a person that never heard of Indian music in my life, and people are like, what? She would have no interest in Indian music. She's never played that. This is the kind of music she plays, and then that's not the music in my car. Then you might have a good lead to who the person who stole the car is. But if they come to me and they say, well, there's Indian music playing in the car, like, yeah, well, she's a big Bollywood freak. I mean, she dances Bollywood stuff and she's been to India. They're like, okay, never mind. That's meaningless. So you have to be somewhat aware of that. It isn't necessarily so. So you can look at something and it could look that way, but you have to then analyze it further. So my one case where, an Andrea Zincada case where her car was stolen and the clutch was destroyed, and it ended up in Southeast Washington, which was like 100% African-American area. My interest in that was that I thought, if you're going to go joyriding, it's not fun to joyride when you can't drive the damn car. So the only reason the car should be there and have the clutch destroyed is because he wanted to go to that location for some absolute reason, like going home, whatever. So I believed he was probably African-American. However, I went to the neighborhood and I asked what was going on in the neighborhood. I talked to other people there to find out whether, for example, it was a drug dealing neighborhood and a lot of white people came rolling in there to buy drugs, or there was a Hispanic contingent I didn't know about. I looked into it further because, to me, I wanted to be sure that there wasn't something that was missing. Now, when I profiled it, I said, I believe because of that clutch and what I've learned in that area of town, likely an African-American guy. And he was. It turned out to be exactly that. But there was another case which I looked at, and the woman's car was stolen. I think her body was stolen. Was her body stolen too? Anyway, she was in a white area of town, and the car ended up in a black area of town. And so people said it's a black guy. And I'm like, or is a white guy dump in the car in a black area town to blame it on black people, you know? And so it was the other choice. So when I finished reviewing it, I said, I think the guy's very local because I thought he was somebody in the neighborhood. And that's why he moved. He wanted to move her out of there because he wanted people to think it wasn't somebody in the neighborhood. So I did profile him as likely a white guy who lived nearby, who dumped the car to blame it on somebody else outside the neighborhood. And that turned out to be true. So you have to be careful. And so you shouldn't shut everything down. You shouldn't say it can't be. Could a white guy have committed these crimes? Absolutely. But there was some evidence pointing elsewhere, and I think they overlooked all the evidence until the DNA came in. Yeah. So that was very unfortunate. And I think that maybe I don't know how, I can't say they didn't handle it properly. I wasn't there. Can't say what the detectives did on the case, but I can say that I still believe that there's not enough training for detectives. They don't get trained in criminal profiling. They don't get trained in evidence analysis, and they don't get trained in stuff like serial homicide. And so if you don't get that, and you may be overlooking a whole bunch of things, or getting theories put together, like we see with the Amy Bradley case right now, which is just tons of people thinking Amy Bradley disappeared from the ship like almost 3 decades ago, is somehow still being held hostage in the sex trafficking thing. It's just the most nonsensical stuff ever. And because most people aren't profilers, so they don't know what's real and what isn't real. What is the way things work and what is the way things don't work. They just don't know. And so detectives are not necessarily different from that. They may not have that knowledge either. And so that when they're investigating a case, they're making guesses that aren't all that realistic, or they're not doing what should be done because they don't think it needs to be done, or. So this is one of these cases where I'm like, I'm glad the DNA came through, because otherwise, this guy was already in prison, but they would never have known who killed the other 3 women if it wasn't for DNA. Because the other thing is, he was already in prison. It wasn't like he was an unknown entity. Nobody ever linked him to these crimes, even though he was already in prison. They didn't link him. And why is that? So yeah, these. Oh, one more thing I want to tell you about the daughter of Jennifer. He was up for the death penalty, and she wanted to make a deal that he got life in prison, so that she and the other family members of the other murdered victims could talk to him, find out why he did what he did, get an apology. Do you think he did any of those things? They talked to him. He took the deal. They talked to him. They said he just stared at him. No remorse, no apology, no explanation. Guess why? Because he's a psychopath. I finally put the psychopath word in there. Ew, why bother? Well, it's the same thing we see with the Brian Koberger thing. The family wanted to look him in the eye in court and tell him what he did to them. And the sad part about it, which and everybody says how wonderful that, when the family member, I forgot which one it was, she was tearing him up in court, and they're like, this is brilliant, this is amazing, this is what should happen. Brian Koberger probably didn't give a crap. He didn't give a crap. They enjoy watching the family members squirm. They're sadists, and so you're not hurting them by telling them they're evil, horrible, disgusting, despicable, blah, blah, blah. You're not hurting them a bit. They're just having a good old time laughing at you. Even if they're not showing it, they're like, inside they're laughing at you. I do not think people should speak to serial killers or mass murderers. Let them. They are what they are. Leave them in a little cave. Leave them alone. Don't think you're going to get anything from them. Because if you talk to them, you're only going to give them pleasure. You're never going to hurt them. And you're never going to learn anything. And even if they apologize, it's all bullshit. So you don't, just say, I'm sorry I killed your mother. I didn't mean to. It's a lie, first of all. And secondly, what is it? He's just lying to you. So how is it going to help you out any? But so I try to encourage family members of people like this. family members who have killed their loved ones, don't waste your time. Don't give them the pleasure. But I can't seem to, that concept doesn't seem to go across very well. But she told him he was ineffectual and a failure and how much he screwed up. And what, you know what? He didn't think, Brian Coburn doesn't think he is a failure. He killed 4 people. He got those women. Ha ha ha. So do you think he cares what she thinks? No, she can say anything she wants. He doesn't give a crap what she says. Just nonsense. Absolutely nonsense. This one, Dr. Stewart drove to the black part of Boston to kill his wife and told cops they were ambushed. Yeah, that works really well sometimes, you know. Yeah. So you go to a, but you know, it doesn't have to be black. It can be white too. It could be whatever area of town, but some area of town that it is where there's a high level of crime, and then you can blame it on, you know, somebody who tried to rob us and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Yeah. It was good to hear, though. Why? For the public, why? You know, I will say this just because I'm really pissed off about it. I have seen, ever since Koberger confessed, he did committed the crimes, there's going to be no trial. YouTubers, TikTokers, ex-people, everybody, it's all over. Every detail of the crime, every horrible thing that happened to these 4 victims has just been pushed out there. Every single thing about Koberger is just an obsession, and it's disgusting and it's despicable. And I won't take a part in that. I think it's revolting. And I'm sorry, but I'm not thrilled that she went and said those things to him just so the public can go, oh, goodies, they told them bad things. They told bad things to Brian Koberger. It just makes me throw up. I'm sorry. Same thing with this guy. Don't waste your time. Don't give him the pleasure. And if you get a pleasure out of hearing people say bad things to a guy like this, it has nothing to do with the victims. It has all to do with some kind of sick pleasure you're personally getting out of telling a bad guy he's a bad guy, which is ridiculous. You got to understand, they don't care. In a sense, he's just making a fool of all you. You know, that's really what it comes down to. And I don't like to see him getting more pleasure than he already got in this crime. It's just, he should just go the heck away. Just make him disappear. If you don't have the death penalty, make sure that he doesn't contact the public ever again. Stop going there with FBI profiles to talk to the guy, write a book about him, So once he's put away, unless you're talking about investigative information to understand how to catch these guys so that people don't get killed, that I'm okay with. I don't have an issue with the case being discussed. But if you'll notice, when I do my cases, I don't show crime scene photos. I don't hardly ever talk about too much of the actual what was done to the victim. Because unless you're the profiler investigating the case and you're going to look at all the crime scene photos to determine things, I'm not putting it out on the internet and discussing it so everybody can ooh and ah. I find that unnecessary. If I were working with the police, yeah, I'd be showing them every one of my crime scene photos because I want them to see I want them to see every one of the injuries so they can see how the crime went down so they can analyze it properly. That serves a great purpose. But on the internet, somebody said that in the last case I discussed. I was talking about Katie Janess, who was brutally murdered down in Piedmont Park in Atlanta. Somebody said, thank you for not reading the autopsy report, discussing it. I'm like, because there was no need. I can tell you she was stabbed over 50 times. I will tell you that because I have to at least set up the thing so you can understand it. But I don't have to I don't have to actually read you the damn autopsy report. It's not going to help you out. It's not going to help the victim out. It's not going to help the crime be solved. That's just nonsense. If it would help the crime to be solved, I would say something. But for the most part, my belief is that detectives need more training. That's how you solve crimes. Doing YouTube shows and saying, "Oh, we're here to solve the crime," is nonsense. It's not really happening, except for those super rare occasions where somebody always has to point out the one out of 10,000 YouTubers who, they said something on a case and it got solved. But I think we get too much. We have to understand they don't care, and I just keep pounding that home. They don't care. What you say to them and anything they say is meaningless. So personally, I don't like that. I don't like families going into court and staring them in the face, staring their loved one's killer in the face and talking and telling them off. I don't like it. I don't think it should be done. That's just the way I think. Because it gives him pleasure, and people don't seem to get the point. Yeah, it's not hurting him at all. And I don't think anybody outside, first of all of us who are not relatives of the 4 Idaho victims, we don't know them. We could be interested in the case being solved, but we don't know them. And if we're getting overly involved in having some kind of emotional attachment to them, that's something maybe we should look at our own lives and think we should maybe do something better in our own lives. The people that matters is those people. And I don't think it needs to be broadcast anyplace. If they want to talk to the guy, fine, don't broadcast it. Okay, keep it off of TV. But they didn't, because guess why? Not because it helped the victims, not because it helped the victims' families, not because it put Brian Koberger in his place, but because it makes money and satisfies people's wanting to watch that, which I just think is, I don't know, I just don't like it. I just don't like it. An aspect of, they're fellow citizens, aspect of public justice, but you can tone it down because most of it is for salaciousness and for people to get off on it. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm the only one who ever says that, but it bugs the heck out of me because yes, it's like watching true crime channels. There's a level of watching stuff to learn, and there's a level of watching stuff for the sickness of it. And if you're watching or just obsessed with a case, like the Amy Bradley case, which there's no reason to be obsessed about. The girl went off the balcony. She's not been kidnapped. But getting obsessed with the case and watching every show ever on Amy Bradley and thinking you're going to solve the case, you need to get a life, because that's not helping anybody. All it is helping the media make a frick load of money. That's what it's all about. And you're playing into it. So there's a lot of stuff out here where it becomes more of an addiction for people watching stuff on crime. It's an addiction. It's a cheap thrill. It's a cheap thrill to watch these things and think about all the evil things that happen. It becomes a sick thrill. So I don't agree with that. I don't. I think it shouldn't be a sick thrill. I mean, these people are being murdered, and if you can't help that, if you're not in the location, if you don't live nearby, it's your county, it's your country, it's your area where you can influence the prosecutor, you can influence the detectives. Are you helping the police? Are you doing anything in your area to help that? Because if something happens in Idaho and you're up in Maine and you're all obsessed with the case, I'm sorry, that's all about you. It has nothing to do with helping anybody. And just because you're a part of the public, no, it could get real. Most of it, the stuff about a lot of these cases is simply a cheap thrill, a cheap personal thrill for being in, for watching this stuff. It's like watching a train wreck, you know what I mean? That goes on and on and on and on and on. So I just personally think you got better things to do with your life. You do. You have better things to do. You want to learn something and be educated, go to the channels that educate. But if you're just watching nonstop garbage, nonstop watching these things to be thrilled, you need maybe to go focus on your own neighborhood, because there's a lot of people there who could use your help. Children could use your help. Elderly could use your help. You could clean up the parks. I mean, you could do so many good things in your own neighborhood. But if you're watching nothing but crime stuff constantly, that especially the gossip channels and the vicious channels and all the nasty stuff that shows all the gore, I'm going to say you're not helping anybody, not even helping yourself. So I'm sorry. I got so frustrated. The Koberger stuff this week, I just went off the deep end on that. It's just pissed me off. I don't watch as much as I used to. Good. You shouldn't. I mean, I'm not helping my own channel out by telling you not to watch, but it is. It's like we should have some level of ability to step back and say, if I'm not helping, if I'm not making a difference, and I'm not learning something which would help. Now, one of the reasons I do my channel is not only about the crime stuff, but I try to teach people about safety. I try to teach people how to analyze stuff, because I've had people come to me and say, yeah, I analyzed this situation. It wasn't a murder, but in my own life, this happened. And by using some skills to analyze, I was able to have a better outcome. That's cool. Might have children who might be getting into trouble. You might have an issue with people in the neighborhood being involved in crimes, and you want to understand what's happening in your own neighborhood. This is all good to me. That's why my education, if I have my choice, would be 100% to detectives. But it's very hard to reach them. And I'm still trying to figure out a way to do that, because they need what I'm teaching, they need most. But then people, citizens like yourselves who are not detectives, can use this to understand the world and also understand the life around you and how to address some of that. So I'm good with that, but I'm very cautious about what I put out, for the reasons of I don't want to be salacious, and I don't want to be just having people be all excited about learning about what happened to people, what horrible things happen to people. I don't like that. But when I see stuff coming out, and that's I want to talk about certain things, like people say, what do you think happened, Pat, on certain crimes that are unsolved? I want to add at least a more rational viewpoint than all the gossip stations out there. And there are decent YouTube channels out there besides my own. And there are some media outlets that occasionally put out very good documentaries, which I'm okay with, because what they're actually teaching something very good. And I've often said, when I see something I really like, then I'm happy to talk about that. What in this case, which is interesting, is what they didn't talk about? Anything that went wrong. All they talked about was how that they had the detective up there saying, I figured it out, was the serial killer, and then they said the DNA matched. They didn't actually. Nothing in there actually helps do better in the future. And there was, watching when I was looking at the case where the little boy's running upstairs to cry. That really got to me, because they were showing that one thing they did show in that, which I liked, was how horrifying it is for the actual family. You out here and I out here. If we haven't gone through a homicide and have a loved one murdered like that, we don't know what people go through. We do not know. It's horrific. And when I see occasionally that really presented well, where you really feel it, I think that's useful, because it gives you at least some kind of empathy for the families and what they go through. So, and why we should do better catching the damn killers. So anyway, that's my soapbox, which I did not intend to get off on tonight. Yeah, I did not. Absolutely did not. Allison says, I agree, Pat. People keep demanding he say why and how he did it. It's all pointless. It's just because it's like they want the gory details. We shouldn't do that. Titillating. I couldn't come up with a word. Thank you, Carla. It seems to become more gory and more titillating, less factual. That is the problem. And I don't, again, when it's done very factually, I find that good, because then people can learn from factual stuff. Gory stuff and titillating stuff, I think, is unnecessary in these. It's just totally unnecessary, and it offends me. I'm a huge 100% hater of slasher films. I think those are the most disgusting things out there, and I think I don't even know if they should be legal, but I guess we can't stop them, because it's fake. But people love slasher films, and I'm like, why would you like a slasher film? Why would you like to see people terrorized and mutilated? What the hell is wrong with you? Because they're all done from the killer's point of view, not from the victim's point of view. They're sick as hell, and I have zero respect for anybody who produces them, who I think are psychopaths, and people who participate in them. It's just sick as hell. And the fact that there are actually people in the world that suffer exactly what they're showing, and yet you're finding that entertaining. Yeah, I got issues with that. I do. I got issues. But we have, some people won't see slasher films, but they'll watch other things that are close to it in even documentary form, which I'm like, because they're not there to understand the police investigation. They're there to go, oh my God, look what happened to them. How many times did they get stabbed? Oh my God. And then he did it. Okay, why are you getting off on that? Yeah. Anyway, Good question, Liz. Are police ever given opportunities to take courses in profiling? Police detectives do not generally get trained at all. People don't get this, but they don't. They join the police force. They go through police school. So they get the basics on, how to do a traffic stop and how to, not screw up when you're reading them their rights and stuff. You go through all the legally stuff and you do some training on, how to handle people and stuff like that, handcuffing and crap. Then you become a police officer. Then you go out in the street, you become, you're out on the streets and you're a regular patrol officer. And you do that. And time goes by. And if you're still around 10 years in and you're really good friends with people and you go to the right bar and you have beers with the right people and they like you, you might get an opportunity to become a detective. So my daughter became a detective. She went to, I think she did some work with the robbery squad and she learned some of the stuff on the job. Then she went to child abuse. Then she went to child abuse first, then sex crimes, then homicide. And now she's already at 20 years. So she's just rolled into domestic because that's actually, you actually get to go home to your family. You know what I mean? Homicide, you never see them. So what training did she get before she became a detective? Zero. She just went right from patrol, right to detective. And then she sort of learned on the job around other people, but on rare occasions, she got to go to maybe a seminar that was 3 days long or something. She'd go to a seminar on certain things. And so I've taught at police seminars. Where they come and I would teach them about serial crimes, or I teach them about criminal profiling, different stuff. Sometimes I've done a whole day seminar. Other ones I've been to where they have a 3-day seminar. I'm just one of the speakers. So there might be a speaker on using cell phone data, and there's another speaker on let's say asphyxiation. So it'll be somebody who teaches about asphyxiation, different kinds of asphyxiation. And then I come along and I do my hour or whatever, or 3 hours, whatever it is. And do they learn something from those? Something. And then you go drink beer. It's a lot of networking. It's a way to get out of the office. So you might learn something, but how much? So in my opinion, a detective shouldn't go into detective work unless he goes to detective school. That detective school should last, I would say, I don't know. I don't think you need a master's degree. All that's nonsense. I think you need to focus heavily on exactly what you need to know, which is profiling, crime scene analysis, and all that kind of stuff. And you go, and that's what you learn. And I keep planning. I have my thing set up for a school online, which has 5 different areas of teaching, which would be forensic pathology, serial homicide, crime scene analysis, psychopathy, and profiling in general. So I have 5 different areas, and I'm going to do short things in them. I'm hoping that police officers can sit in their cars and look at these segments, and they'll learn what I specifically think they need to learn. So when they become a detective, they're like, oh, I listened to a lot of the Pat Brown stuff, and she taught this, and this. Now I know more about this, and I know more about this. So when I analyze a crime, I can do better. That's my hope. But I would prefer that they go to a 6-month school or something, or a 3-month school, even that 3-month school where it's just focused on the profiling and crime scene analysis. They do that. They learn all these techniques. They learn how to analyze. Then they go on to the job. But that doesn't exist. I don't know why. I don't know why you become a detective without going to detective school. I don't know why you become a juror without going to jury school. My thing about that I don't like about civilian juries. Same reason I want a professional jury system. Why? Because you have no training. So you get these detectives who roll into these jobs without the background. Now, they're police officers, and they have the heart for it, but they don't necessarily have the training. And I've been to some areas, some police departments, sheriff's departments, when I've done profiling with them. And sometimes I've walked in and I've gotten the detective that, whatever reasons, he did learn a lot of stuff. Or maybe he on his own, like I studied on my own, 400 books. Maybe he's been reading all the books of all the things he needs to read to learn stuff. And he's really smart. And I'm like, whoa, you did a good job. I've walked into other departments and they tell me what they think happened in a crime. And I'm like, seriously? That's what you think? Well, okay then. Now, most of the time why people think detectives do better than, generally speaking, than some of them might do, is because most crimes are stupid people who leave evidence, or they're seen shooting the person or whatever. They're not that hard to solve. So the real issue comes down to you got to make sure all the evidence is nothing is going wrong, so the defense can't use that against you and then say the prosecution, you can't, all this technicality stuff. So when you got that, it's much easier. But when you get to these tricky crimes, then you have a problem. How do you solve a crime which you don't know who the killer is? A stranger homicide, the Aiton Pates thing. I just did a thing on Aiton Pates, little boy 5-year-old boy who went missing in 6 years old. I forgot, it was 5 years old in New York City, and they arrested the guy years later, and I don't think it's the right guy. And they've just released him from prison. The judge said, they did something wrong, so he's now out. People are pissed because they think he did do it. I don't think he did, but I don't think they analyzed the crime properly. So they got the wrong guy. So, so when it gets more tricky, you need to have training. The easier stuff, fine. And the same thing with jury system. I mean, most cases, when the jury goes in there, they're like, okay, the prosecution gets up and says, here's a video of the guy killing the person. You're like, all right, I think he's guilty. You're good. But what happens if you don't have the video? Then you start getting into what's all the evidence? What's the fingerprint evidence? What's the DNA evidence? What, God knows, all the circumstantial evidence. And all of a sudden the jury's like, I don't know, because they don't know. They haven't been trained. So yeah, most of the cases they're correct because it's that easy. And but the other ones, so no, detectives don't get what they need. I'm teaching. I told the students up front I would not accept book reports on work. Wait, I got to hear this now. Oh, that's interesting. That you wouldn't accept book reports from stuff that was disgusting and gory. No, I'm good with that. It doesn't, especially for a teacher. Yeah, I'm not a Stephen King fan. I gotta admit. Not only do I think his books are gory, but he always screws up the endings. So I don't think he's a very good writer. That's just me. But why was it cathartic? I don't understand, Tim, why it's cathartic for you. I don't get it. Just because I don't understand it. I don't know why I don't know why, Tim, you need to have something for you. You aren't one of the victims. You're not one of the victims' families. I don't know why. I don't understand that. You're happy that she yelled at a bad guy? That did something for you? I don't know. I don't understand why it would do something for you. Because you wanted to yell at the bad guy too? Say, why you meanie? You're a meanie guy. Why did you do this horrible thing to these people? I don't know. I'm telling you and I are going to have to agree to disagree on that. I think it is not necessary. I don't think we have the right for that. If we have some issue that we want some cathartic thing from something we're not involved in, I don't think we have that right. I don't. That's why I don't think all the trials need to be televised so that people can get their rocks off on it. You know what I mean? I don't. And people say, well, I want to be able to see everything. Well, too damn bad. Go do something useful. Stop sitting in front of the TV. Just, I don't know. So I say these are some issues that maybe I feel differently because I've worked in this field. And I think of this field as something that is a necessity we need to have good law enforcement. We need to have good detectives. We need to have a good judicial system so that we can, prevent homicide, prevent crime, and we can properly address crime, and we can properly stop crime. We can properly put criminals away. It's not about me. It's about, we have a system that our whole community can do well. But most of the purient interest in Brian Koberger has nothing to do with anything healthy, and that's just my opinion on that. So, but we can still be friends. It was a cathartic for her. No, this is an interesting thing. It could be, but you know how many people have screamed and yelled and met with serial killers to find out it wasn't cathartic at all. They went away actually feeling massively traumatized, like they have been assaulted all over again. More of them feel that way than come away feeling good about anything. So, because they didn't get what they came for, which they some reason want to have They want to understand a crime they cannot understand. And they want an apology, which is never going to be an apology. They want what is unrealistic. So they're never going to get that. So I guess if you want to spew stuff at a bad guy, you spew stuff at a bad guy. If that makes you feel good, I guess it does. But I don't think it needed to be televised. I think if that's what you want to do in private, fine. I don't like the I think we've over televised everything. And I think it's just kind of sick. I just think it really is. I think it's sick. So, yeah. So, but, again, my opinion is not always everybody else's opinion. But I've just been in this field too long. And that's why sometimes when people say, why have I attacked certain channels? It's because it makes me very angry when I see certain channels abusing. They have this, this platform, and they're out there spewing lies and spewing gossip and getting people all excited and all revved up and I just about stuff that they have no business being revved up about. And it's quite frankly sickening to me, and because I don't think it's right, and it doesn't really help people. And people always think, oh, it's helping the family. We're putting this out so they can help to find whoever kidnapped this person or whoever killed. No, you aren't. You're just doing it because you make a lot of money off of YouTube. Don't be a liar. Because if you're doing that many shows about something, you're full of it. And anybody who does a YouTube show should know damn well that we don't really have much of an effect on actual cases. Teaching people to understand things is one thing. Teaching detectives to understand things. Say if you want to listen to people because they help you understand things, I'm good with that. But we are not. I have never claimed I'm a crime-solving channel because I know I'm not. Because in spite of the fact I'm even a criminal profiler, not just a gossiper, what I'm doing here is not solving crimes unless my teaching of education helps the future detectives. That's where it helps. That's what I'm hoping for. But there's crimes that I've worked on, and I've done a couple of them on here, and I don't think that by bringing them publicly, that's necessarily going to solve the crime. All of a sudden, people are going to pop out of the woodwork. You know what it usually does? That Amy Bradley crap. You're going to get 500 more people claim they saw Amy Bradley, and they're going to give the police a headache. That's what they're going to do, because they're making claims that aren't true. And we see that with a lot of missing people. They go missing, and suddenly the psychics call the police, and everybody and their brother calls the police, and they're all saying things like, oh, I saw that person at the mall. I saw that person. Blah, blah, blah. And the police are supposed to follow up every one of these tips. All it does is waste their time, and they can't focus on the damn case because they got so many people calling in and harassing them because they saw some damn YouTube show. So it's a problem. It's not what people's imaginations of how it's helping things. It's not how it's helping things. It's not helping. So I think we need to do more things that help, and we need to really work on making sure our communities are safe, making sure that our children grow up well. Maybe we could have better families, better schools. You want to stop crime? Start there. So I do think sometimes it does hurt the families all over again. And of course, some people have accused me of that too. It's like, you're talking about this family, you're talking about people. And so, you're doing the same thing, Pat Brown. And it's a bit tricky in the sense that I don't believe we should have zero conversation. Okay. I don't believe that, because then we have nobody learns anything. Nobody there's no memory of anything. I don't think we should have no conversation, but there's a difference between having conversation and just being a grifter and hurting people through grifting, which we see a lot of on X. So we see a lot of that on TikTok. I mean, the stuff on TikTok on Amy Bradley is insane. These people I know, now we know where Amy Bradley is. We know that picture is real. Oh my God. I mean, that she was seen over, and they're all like, you can go from one TikTok to another and they're all saying the same. They're all saying she's out there somewhere and she was kidnapped, blah, blah, blah. These are people who have no knowledge of a damn thing. They're not professionals. And it to me, it's like, don't go berserk over something you know nothing about. Don't present yourself and your channel as understanding stuff when you don't. So at least I want to see somebody in the business. Like if you're going to be an artist, I want an artist teaching me stuff. If it's going to be history, I want a person who studies history. I don't want just anybody, So I think that when it comes down to true crime, I will at least see detectives, profilers, people who have some level of ability. Unless you're just telling the story once, I'm okay with it. But it's a wild, wild west out here, and so people can do whatever they damn well please. And so there's a whole lot of, most of it's for entertainment value, and people like to be entertained, and it's kind of a shame. So, yeah. False hope. Well, I think it's mostly about making money. I mean, Netflix is making a fortune off of this thing. By the way, my video, which I just did on Amy, it was called Amy Bradley and the Myth of Sex Trafficking and the Myths of Sex Trafficking. It was just demonetized by YouTube. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure they monetize all the rest of the stuff, and they got Netflix all over the place making a fortune. But I actually talk about the truth about sex trafficking and the myths of it, and they demonetized the video. So it's like, okay, go figure. Yeah, she's been dead since day one. I absolutely 100% will believe that. And there's cases where I will say I'm not sure. I know she was not sex trafficked. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And it makes zero sense. And that's because people do not understand how sex trafficking works. And I've been called, I was told I was old fashioned in my thinking and I don't understand things. I'm like, no, you don't understand things. This is my field. I actually understand things. I'm trying to explain how it really works. Are there people who are sex trafficked? Yes. Is it the way you think? No. And so, go watch that film. That video if I. So it's Amy Bradley and Myths of Sex Trafficking, which has now been demonetized. So you don't have to worry that I'm making a penny off of it. A cat update. I'm going on a high note. Sorry. I don't know what set me off on this. Yeah. That's why a lot of times people are already gone by now. So, it's like people are like, you rattled on too long. It's like, well, you just turn it off and go away. It's YouTube. Mac came in 2 nights ago. Mac came in and he actually ended up sleeping in my doorway for an hour of my bedroom. So it was kind of cool. I got back after I fed him. I got back into the bed so that he could have a little distance from me, and he didn't leave the room. So he just laid in the doorway for an hour. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. So then last night I got out of bed and he was in the doorway, and I got out of bed and I sat down and I did the thing where he licks the food off my hand, and I look him in the eye now to get him comfortable. If you're new to the channel, he's a feral cat. He's not a house cat. I've been working with him for a year and a half, and he won't let me touch him to this day. But he does come into my bedroom now. So then I fed him on my lap, and then I put the bowl, after he ate half the food, I put the bowl on the floor, and I got back into bed thinking maybe he'll sleep in the doorway again. And he just gave me stink eye, and he left. So it didn't really work out. So he's keeping me company. Yeah, he comes in for like 30 minutes a day. It's the most expensive cat I've ever owned because I feed him better than any cat I've ever owned because I'm trying to lure him. I'm luring him. Yes, I'm one of those. And that's a good point. Someone probably reported your video as an instructional vid on how to sex traffic. I have been reported by people. A lot of times I have had a lot of my videos be crashed. I did one on Jeffrey Epstein and it was out for like a few years, and it was just removed it wasn't demonetized. It was removed by YouTube, and I was given the black, mark against me, check, you just you had a bad video out here. I'm sure somebody reported me on that. When people don't like people, they report them, and the YouTube doesn't really spend a lot of time investigating the claims, but if they get enough of them, if there's like a bunch of people that come after you on YouTube, then they can just pull your videos and pull your channel sometimes. So it's kind of a frightening thing when you work very hard and you're an educational channel to have that happen. But yeah, so I don't know, probably somebody did complain that I was whatever. So I've asked for a human review. So what happens is after they suddenly take your monetization away, you ask for a human review, and I don't know what human they've got over there because I've had human reviews that are just ludicrous. I did one show where I got demonetized because the algorithm, whatever the electronic stuff was, took 2 words I said and misheard them and thought I said a bad word when I didn't say that. There were 2 different words, and they put them together and thought I said a bad thing. So they demonetized the video because I just said a bad thing. So I asked for a human review, and there was actually the spot. They actually knew where the spot was, which is rare that they ever tell you anything. I actually knew the spot. And I asked the human review, and they came back and agreed that it was a bad thing. So I'm like, okay. And the worst one was on Netflix. I did a thing on John Bonet, when John Ramsey came and did that Netflix thing, and I just did my video was simply an analysis of John Ramsey and the Netflix show. I showed no pictures. I didn't even talk about the crime scene, and that was probably the biggest, most successful video I'd had out in like years. And I actually had a payday off of that one. It was like, oh, good, I can pay my bills. And all of a sudden, about 2 weeks later, they came back and they took all the money back and took away the monetization. I have no idea why, because there was nothing in there. So YouTube's a little bit haphazard, and you just never know. And it's very frustrating because, it does, to do the work on YouTube, you do need to earn at least a living and of some sort. And when they take away your earnings, it's kind of frustrating. So yeah, the expensive, he does like the expensive stuff. He does. So yeah. But hey, that's the way things are. So the other good news is, the cat is still coming around, and I will leave him food tonight because my sons are taking me out for my birthday dinner, my birthday was last Wednesday, my 70th. And so my boys are taking me out for dinner tonight, which is nice. And my daughter already took me out for the day on my birthday. So that was really cool. And so it's very sweet. So I'm going to go enjoy that with them. And so I have to go get dressed now. So now I'll be in a better mood. Oh, Lord. Which one? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. But anyway. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Liz. I appreciate it. I love the Cleopatra book. Yay, great. And also, I did 10 shows on the Cleopatra, whole issue of Cleopatra. So there's 10 shows on that on YouTube. And I had a production company call me up 2 weeks ago, was interested in doing a whole thing on Cleopatra. And loved my book and loved what I did, and said, we couldn't get them to go along with it, whatever production company, whoever the big guys are. So there goes that again. I've tried to get a show, actual production company to do a whole thing on my series. I wanted a series of 4 covering all the stuff that I talk about in the book. And it's been 10 years now, and I'm having no success. So that's the way it is. Thank you. I'll enjoy being with my boys. I will. So it was nice. They're sometimes hard to get a hold of and get together, but they do live in the area. So it's all my 3 kids live in the area here. So it's pretty awesome as far as that goes. Anyway, thank you for listening to the show. And it was a little different, I know, than usual. And all the stuff I just babbled on about. And but some things just get to me, when I see it, and I find it not something we should be doing as a society. So I think we're a little bit when you see things like what was it, Oprah's channel, remember Oprah, what was, somebody tell me what the name of Oprah's channel is. Oxygen. When Oxygen started, it was all about how to positive stuff for females, positive stuff for women. You know what it is now? Almost solid crime. So too many channels have gone solid crime and brutal crime. And, they don't care about the families. They don't care about the detective work. They just care about the gruesomeness of it. And that's what makes money. So I find that unfortunate, So anyway, thank you guys for being here. I'm going to go out and have a good time now. And I will see you for the hangout. And if you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe. I don't always do soapboxes, and rarely on my case shows, usually only on the hangouts. It's one of those weeks. So anyway, thank you guys for being here. Bye.